NVMe hard drives. Over the last 2 years, we've brought several different presentations into the Open Compute Forum. We've shared some of the ideas, why we care about NVMe hard drives, how we can use it, and as well as some of the challenges. So with that, we want to kick off a work stream to talk about the NVMe hard drives in detail. To go beyond what we've done so far, we actually want to talk about why it's useful. We've seen things like multi-actuator. We talk about a unified software stack. And there are many other things like computational storage that start making sense and start driving why we should really focus our cycles on getting this right and exploring things like connectors and other details around there. This isn't going to be easy, but this is an opportunity to leave some of the legacy behind. We've had 3.5-inch drives, we had 2.5-inch drives, we had SATA and SAS. Now's an opportunity to actually explore what would the world look like if we tried to make it NVMe. Is that a new connector? We already have the protocol adjustments being made in the NVMe workgroup, but what else is missing? And we've seen a lot of industry interest. We've sparked some conversations within the workgroup, but I think now that people have had time to digest it, they've realized that this is something we need to actually go and explore because it does take years to get done. So we have consumers, we have drive vendors, we have system providers, and many of the enablers in the ecosystem, whether it's connectors or the protocol connections to make this happen. And so a lot of us are interested, we're all interested in participating, joining a work group and really exploring this further. And in this work group, we want to cover several things. And this is not an exhaustive list, there's just some things to keep in mind. Drive form factor, do we stick with the traditional 3.5-inch form factor? What about the connectors? Do we take the traditional SAS SATA connector? Do we use a U.2 or U.3 and modify it? Or do we explore something totally new? Does the TA1002 make sense to keep it similar with EDSFF? Who knows? So we will dig into that, find out how many lanes of PCI Express. Do we need 1 lane, 2 lanes? And if so, why? What voltages? Should we consider 5 and 12 volt like we have today? Or do we consider 12 volt only? Again, we're leaving legacy behind. We have the ability to change, or we have the ability to keep it as similar as possible to disrupt the ecosystem a little bit less. And that goes back into things like the features. What else do we want to see? Are there any shortcomings on SAS SATA that now that we reflect on the industry 10, 20 years back, what do we want to change? What do we want to add? Are there certain things that we would like to put in there that are new? And then once we have some of this ecosystem aspect, what about system designs? How does that change? Do we build the same storage systems and JBODs of the past, or does having an NVMe attached enable new things? And if so, how do we start contributing some of those architectures and designs into the Open Compute ecosystem? Because this isn't just about devices. This isn't just about the consumer. This is going to be everything from the consumer all the way down to the end user that has to consume this. So we encourage everybody to join the work group and get involved. We have a separate mailing list that we have for the NVMe hard drives, and we'll set the kickoff emails to this mailing list, make sure everybody's engaged, but please join this because after the first few occurrences, we'll probably drive all of the meeting invites and the detailed conversation in this dedicated work group instead of the general storage work group. We also have a placeholder for the charter on a wiki that you can see linked here, and that'll continue to evolve over time. The very first meeting, we obviously want to discuss the charter, what we're thinking makes sense here, and really get everybody's feedback on what's missing, what should we add, where does the charter stop, where does a standards body take over. So please join us, Mohammed from Seagate, Dave from Western Digital, and myself from Microsoft as we organize this and dive into the future. Thank you, everybody. And with that, our first presenter will be Mohammed from Seagate, who's going to go into a lot more depth on the subject of NVMe hard drives.
Hey, Jason, just so we keep things on schedule for folks who are watching through the OCP Tech Week website, we'd like to start Mohammed's talk in 12 minutes.
Perfect. We're really
We just blew through the agenda pretty quick there. Yeah.
Now, for ease of use, guys, I think it's best that we just keep the live stream up so we can use this time for open discussion, or if there's any other topics you all want to cover, we can definitely do that, and then we can switch over to Mohammed in 12 minutes. one great feature about this particular arrangement that we're using is if anyone has any questions for the storage volunteer leads, they can join this Zoom just by clicking the Join Now button below the video player. That will take them out of FN Virtual and bring them into this Zoom to ask those questions directly. If they're done asking their questions, or if we just decide we don't like their questions, we can then remove them from the Zoom and put them back into the FN Virtual platform. So lots of flexibility here today, and we can use that to help drive discussion.
Did we have any questions? I don't think I saw any.
No questions yet. It may just be that folks are still reeling from the speed that you delivered that initial talk there, Jason.
It was meant to be the kickoff and the overview. We're not really going into the details here, but yes.
Are they wondering when the session starts? You know?
No problem. No problem. Yeah, if anyone is listening, encourage you to hop on the Zoom. Click that Join Now button.
Right, so anyone who has questions, please join the Zoom and you'll be able to ask the questions real time while we wait for the first official presentation.
Michael, will questions on the chat show up in the Zoom chat or another place?
So questions that come in through the OCP Tech Week website will only be on that particular chat function there. What I'll do, Dave, is I can copy and paste those into the Zoom, or if you guys have both windows open, you should be able to see those as well.
So I have a question. This is Bill Boyle from Western Digital. So you mentioned 12 volt only, you know, breaking from the past. Have you done analysis as to what the value of 12 volt only on the whole complete system is? And is that something that Microsoft or anybody else on the call thinks is a strong value?
That's an excellent question. We've certainly looked in some of the pros and cons, but that's from a Microsoft perspective, looking at a system design. We'd certainly encourage the drive vendors, because I think this will impact you a little bit more. Definitely, this is something we should bring up in the work stream, because I think everyone is going to have a slightly different angle, whether it's a system provider not having to do 5 volt regulation, or a drive vendor having to do a different style of regulation. So I think this is actually probably one of the best topics as we kick off the work stream.
Okay. Yeah, because we were looking at maybe there's cost advantages. It's cheaper at a system level without that extra step down to 5 volts that the system has to do. And power consumption, is it more efficient just to have the one rail? So I think it's a good topic too.
Yeah, speaking from a system provider perspective, as we have to regulate 12 volts and 5 volts, you have to think about things like failure domains. Are you making a shared 5 volt regulator? Are you switching off and gating power for 12 and 5? A lot of the specs, I forget which pin it is in SAS and SATA for the power disable bit. And you start thinking about simplifying the ecosystem. Now's a perfect time to revisit this. From a system provider perspective, it'd certainly be a lot easier to do 12 volts than having to regulate on our side. So we would certainly appreciate it, but there may be other complications down at the drive level.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason.
All right, do we have any other questions?
Hi, this is Pekan from Smart Modeler. I have a question. How can I access the past discussions and any of the recordings for the thermal assessment you did on E1.s and other SSDs? Is there a link for that on the website?
Actually, excellent question. Right now, a lot of the details on the past NVMe presentations for hard drives will be under some of the work groups. So we've done a lot of face-to-face. We call them quarterly face-to-face meetings. We had that for the past 2 years. So if you look under past presentations, you'll be able to find it. But that's actually a really good suggestion. Perhaps under the wiki for the NVMe hard drives, we can actually link to some of these presentations. So it's much easier to find than having to dig through.
Yeah, but are you asking about the thermal modeling discussions or the thermal implications for the...
Specifically on the thermal modeling and the related discussions, because I was not able to find any of the past page.
So there's I did create a wiki for the few thermal meetings we had, and most of the, it's linked. If you go to the storage project wiki and look down, and you'll find a link to the thermal work stream or something like that. And that'll take you to a wiki page, which does have a number of the presentations and also the recorded meetings that we had. We had a few meetings and we went quiet. Now we're starting up again. So let me know if you can't find it.
Sure.
I've actually just placed that link down there in the
Good.
Etherpad. So
Okay,
if you
yeah.
scroll down below the video player, you'll see that Etherpad there, and you can click through.
Sure. Thanks a lot.
Okay, I think we have time for a couple more questions if anyone else has any questions.
Hi, Jason. It's David Allen, CK. Can you, maybe you touched on it. I did miss the first few slides, but can you talk about timing at all and, industry timing with respect to the goals of this group and what some of the, I guess the timing with respect to completion of some of the activities, what the expectations are?
Excellent question. So I'd like to start the first kickoff of the work group probably in the next week or two. Obviously, with Thanksgiving coming up, it may end up being the first week of December. So I think perhaps first order of business will be going over the charter, kind of what we're trying to do. And I think you bring up a great point that do we want to set some deadlines of when we think we need to address either scope or specific attributes of this? I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking a lot about the connectors, and the interfaces, things that actually would impact building a hard drive design or building a system design. I know we already have the TP 4088, I believe, in the NVMe work group, at least from the protocol side. But
Right.
we definitely want to start solidifying some of the requests and getting input from the broader industry. I know that your team and a few others have been looking at this for a while. Mohammed will talk about some ideas, but if there are specific products that are being kicked off or being explored, that may help give us some motivation to drive to conclusion the key elements of the NVMe hard drive work group.
Yeah, thanks.
So feel free to propose ideas if there.
Yeah.
You have a timeline that you want to start building a POC sometime next year, and we need to have the work group try to hit some deadlines. I think that's a good push to get things done.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, understood.
Any other questions? Pretty far ahead of schedule. So anything on the overall storage project, the agenda for today, everything is fair game.
A quick question. Now that the storage class memories are coming into play in the mainstream, will that be something covered under the storage groups charter or a server groups charter?
That's a good question. It depends on what specific attribute. Where would storage class memory fit in open compute? Is this a form factor question, an API question? Is this how you would fit it in a server? I think depending on the way you ask the question or what you're specifically interested in. So if you were to say, how do we build storage class memory, large arrays of storage class memory, maybe that's something that would be in the storage work group. If it's more of how do we integrate something into the server, a traditional server use, that may fall into the server side. And with storage class memory, there's actually quite an overlap between storage systems and server systems. So I don't know if there's any rigid guidance we could give on where it would end up.
Is there a particular aspect of it
yeah, I was looking for, on the software side, there is an overlap between how the storage class memories look to the CPU host. It looks more like a memory, but it is again having a storage built into it, a persistent built into it. So that's the piece. I think I see that there is no standard answer, because everyone seems to design their own stack, own libraries, own APIs, and the usage is spilled all over the place. It is used as a memory at some places. It is used as a block storage at some places. So my aim was to understand if it goes into the charter of this group, is there a plan to standardize some of the APIs, or or put it as a part of extension of NVMe spec or something like that. That was my main intention. How to standardize.
So again, it's kind of, we'd have to figure out which part of it we want to discuss. So fundamentally, the storage project is trying to stay in the realm of broad industry requirements. So if there is an area of storage class memory that needs to be fleshed out from requirements that might lead to a standard, we could tackle that. There are already activities for things like NVDIMMs, right, in JEDEC. And there's work around the industry, but and SNIA has done work on, right, the NVM programming model. So I guess we'd have to discuss a little bit more what I can't answer whether we'd have a role to play or not, a value-added role. But sure. We have to figure out what we want to, what aspect we really want to zero in on.
Sure, I understand, because it brings to a lot of questions. It's not only the software, the endurance part of it, and which then comes back to some of the storage related learnings which we have can be put back into that segment. So there are a lot.
So
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, persistence is something that's never been really that fleshed out as to how people really take advantage of it versus just having it be a lower tier of slightly slower than DRAM memory. Anyway, we should, let's talk further.
So we do have our next speaker on.